you have to back yourself, and then all you're doing is letting yourself down and don't take anything else into account. Because I think putting that extra pressure on yourself kills creativity. There was a switch that went off in my head when I went, this is what I'm going to do. And I could not, for the life of me, turn that switch off. You go with your gut because it knows what your head hasn't figured out yet. And I've always gone with that. And my head hasn't come up with any other solutions to do anything else.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Niamh Algar is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your process of inhabiting a character?
Figuring out what drives them. Figuring out what they're scared of, what their fears are, what makes them laugh, what their passions are. And if you can answer those, it's a pretty good start. And then going back further and just figuring out who they were as a kid, what their family dynamic was, and just creating the blueprint for that character. And I'll make a list between what my similarities are and differences are with the character. Oh. And then opening the dialogue with the director as soon as possible, because for me, acting is all about trust. And what kind of gets in the way of that is just miscommunication, and that just breeds fear, and people are afraid to make mistakes because they don't want to look like an idiot, because they might have questions that they should have asked like months previous to filming. And if you just ask those questions straight off the bat, it gets so much out of the way, and you can get into the meat of what you're going to create together early on.
Why are actors so afraid to ask questions early?
I was going to answer it. I'm asking you, but I want to hear your answer, but I really do.
I think it's because you're so used to being the person who fought to get the role. So to ask a question, like an obvious question, they might think, oh my God, she doesn't know who the heck this character is at all, or she doesn't know what we're making. And you're afraid that you're going to lose what you've just got. But you shouldn't think like that, because you shouldn't feel like you owe them for being there. It's the idea of feeling safe.
What I was thinking is that maybe you don't want to stop the process that has already begun because you have the role, which is all about you processing all of these questions and not necessarily having even an outside force, which is the one that's supposed to be helping you, answering things right off the bat. Like, I think that's a valid reason not to ask. But my whole thing is that what I'm learning is that if you and the director are on different pages, it's just good to know that up front, because you might be heading down roads, and if you think that he or she is on that road, that could be a real big problem. Isn't that right?
Yeah, massively. And it's also working the dialogue between the two of you, so that when it comes to the set, there's a shorthand then, and time isn't being spent trying to over explain something. Because like, I worked with a director recently, and we had this incredible shorthand because we spent months Skyping one another. I was shooting a series in South Africa, so we couldn't be in the same room together, but we set aside every weekend to just Skype for a couple of hours and just talk. And by the time we came to filming, people had thought we'd worked previously together on other projects, but we hadn't. We felt comfortable with one another. And I think it goes both ways. It's not just the actor feeling like they have to feel the trust in the director. The director has to trust the actor. And, because like, filmmaking is the director's medium. Theater is actor's medium. So you've done all your work months previous before you start filming. You're doing the filming for free.
I love that. I like to think, I like to begin to think about it like that. It brings an importance to all that other work. It's sad that we think like that, when you put money into something, but it's really true.
Yeah.
Was there a moment when you thought, okay, now I'm going to take this endeavor seriously, this acting endeavor? Like, what was that moment?
I think I had enough people telling me not to do it. And I think once you...
Once the number got large enough.
Yeah,
Like,
that it was
now.
like, now this is on me, and I don't have to prove to anyone that what I want to do is the right choice. It was very freeing when you let go of that, when you realize that the reason why you're doing it is solely your choice. Yeah, I'd like sold, like I was like paying rent, but I was selling things at the same time. Like I was like selling equipment, like camera equipment that I spent months saving for before, trying to do self-tape, and I was selling that in order to keep myself in a rented property in Dublin at the time. And I think that was when I was like, okay, this is like Niamh, you're in deep here, there's no going back. But yeah, it's just, you have to back yourself, and then all you're doing is letting yourself down, and don't take anything else into account. Because I think putting that extra pressure on yourself kills creativity. I don't know, I find it there was a switch that went off in my head when I went, this is what I'm going to do. And I could not for the life of me turn that switch off. And I knew that you go with your gut because it knows what your head hasn't figured out yet. And I've always gone with that, and my head hasn't come up with any other solutions to do anything else. And it just fits, it just feels right. And I didn't ever think of wanting to do anything else. So, but yeah, you take the work seriously, but you don't take yourself too seriously.
Oh, I like that. And let's hope your head never catches up to.
Yeah, and as your head figures, it's like, what are you at? you play pretend for a living. What?
You were really on a run there of, like, the way you tell the story is like you went to stay with a friend and you just started having all these meetings and were landing all these auditions.
Yeah.
Did you lock into a certain thing in terms of auditioning at that time, or was this just something like people were finally catching up to you?
I think it was a bit of both. I moved to London, I met my agent, and we clicked, and he got what I wanted to. He got immediately who I was and what work I wanted to do, and I think that was 50% of it. And I just said, like, get me in the room and I'll get the work, kind of thing.
And what was that? I mean, was that like were you just psyching yourself up and him up, or was that really, did you really believe that?
I believed it, yeah. Maybe I'm crazy. But yeah, I did. I believed, because I moved to London by myself, and I had no crutches. I had no one to lean on and fall back on. If the idea would be to move back to Ireland if it didn't pan out, and luckily it did. But like, I worked my ass off before I got there. I worked, I think, because someone asked me recently, it's like, did you work for free before you were getting paid? And I was like, of course it was. That was how did you learn screen acting? That's how I learned it. Like, I learned the basics in theater, but for screen acting, you learn, like, I learn in the doing. And to get into those rooms and get in front of the casting director, I needed my agent to do that. But yeah, it's like self-tapes. It was making sure that the one that I was sending off was the one that I was, in my gut, that I was happy with. And we have a very open dialogue, me and my agent, that, if I send something, he's like, I don't know, I think you could probably, I think we could do a little bit better. It's, I trust him, and I'll work on it. And, but that's it. I think it's applying that. It's taking the work seriously, but not taking yourself too seriously.
It comes up over and over again. Like, the actors sit down to talk and they say, I don't want to take myself seriously. Like almost as if it's something's going to happen if they take themselves seriously. Like, it's starting to make me think that it's almost like this is part of the equation. Like, for good acting, like it's like this dance of, like, once you take yourself too seriously, then you're losing some kind of mystical connection to the source or something like that. Is
Yeah.
that insane, or is that something you really
No, that's so true, because you lose the play. You look at kids.
the
Kids
play?
don't take
That's it.
kids don't
Yeah.
take themselves seriously. They just
Right.
commit to they commit to just being goofy and wanting to make people laugh. And like, I look at my nephew Ethan, and he's always pretending to be like either a stormtrooper or a dinosaur, and he's like fully committed. I believe him when I see him. You know, but he's not an actor, he's just a kid, and he still has that play. And I think that a lot of great actors, like the ones that we aspire to be, they're just kids getting paid to play pretend. What I always find is that, like, when you see on sets of, like, people are afraid to try it, so they'll over explain and talk, and then they won't do it because they're afraid to actually make a mistake. Whereas I'd rather do 10 takes and for one of them to be decent than to talk about it for 20 minutes and then do one take and be like, oh, I don't know if that was what we were really going for, but we've run out of time.
Is that because you come from the stage? Is that right? Like the beginning of your life?
Yeah, like youth theater. That's how I got into it.
So it seems like people that have stage experience are not afraid to try it. Is that true in generally?
Well, I think it's because it's a good question. It's just all through, like when I did a series a couple of years ago with a director called Shane Meadows, and everything was prepared through workshops. So we workshopped everything bar the scenes that we were going to shoot. So we had tried every other possibility of scenes that might have happened in that day or in that year before you, like, because then on the day you're gonna bring the goods, and you don't want to overwork that emotion or that feeling. Or you play out scenes with characters that you're never going to work with, like in the story, and that's fascinating. You find out more about that character in the doing. And
we have to talk about this. Wait, we have to talk about this. Because you're talking about the virtues, which is very hard to see in America. It's very annoying how hard this is to see in America, but I saw it and I love it. It's like a 4-hour freaking movie. I want more things to be done like this. It's like a limited series, but it feels like a 4-hour movie, which is so what I want right now. I can go on and on about this. I'm going to go on and on, but like things breathe. Everything, like scenes breathe, and it feels like you actors are just able to breathe and work things out, and amazing actors. And this stars Stephen Graham, who I love. So you're talking about, you're improvising in these workshops scenes. Meadows is not giving you temporary scripts for these other scenes that he's not going to shoot.
No.
Like you just said, which is so interesting. That way you're being the characters, but you're not mining the gold that you're going to be mining on the day of the shoot.
Yeah.
Where like Mike Lee, mines that field for the gold over and over and over and over again. And I don't know how the actors don't get sick of that drill going into that particular gold over and over and over again. This, it seems like you're playing the characters, you're developing relationships with the other characters, right? Because you can feel a reality in these scenes that is really rare. But anyway, the way you made it sound like with the virtues, though, like you sat down in the chair and you didn't know what they were going to do with your hair.
No, yeah, I was a huge fan of Shane's. It was actually with my meeting with my agent, and the first time I met him, I said, Shane Meadows is someone who I want to work with. That's what I'm aiming towards.
That's amazing.
That's the type of gritty drama that I want to get, in deep with. And funnily enough, that was like one of the first things that I did. But yeah, I like when you look at Shane's work, you kind of see he's got like a very strong sense and style, and you embody that character. So I was like completely game for whatever he was going to do. So we sat down in the chair, and then we dyed my hair like this, like a highlighter yellow. It was bright, it was different, And then he was just like, maybe we should shave it. And I was like, okay, cool. And we started shaving just the side. And then he stopped. And I was like, my heart was in my mouth because I was like, why are we just stopping now? Like, he's like, no, that's it. It has to look like she starts something and she never finishes it.
Oh.
She always has to look like she's trying to have that cool haircut, but she doesn't quite hit the mark. Everything always just nearly there, but it's never perfect. And that was so informative of that character. She never finishes anything, and the one thing she sets out to do, she does, but it ruins her. And it was funny because it was in those months of prep when we're workshopping and improvising. We're also meeting with. I met with a lot of women who was like Dinah, who had gone through that experience, and a lot of social workers, just to find out the logistics of what it would be like to try and get your kid back after years of putting it up for adoption. And to me, and to especially to Shane, it's just grounding in the truth. That's what he's looking for. He's just trying to capture the truth.
The scene that I'd like to talk about is the scene where you're attempting to get intimate with Stephen Graham's character, and something goes wrong. But the scene feels like it takes place over so long of a time.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
because they're long takes. They're like, a lot of average takes were like 20 minutes long.
Wow.
He had like multicam, and we just sit in those scenes.
There's so many points to like this scene. Like emotional markers and turns, and you know what I mean, that are so subtle and done so organically. So I'd like to know like how much of that was laid out. So you guys are workshopping all these other things. You get to the day of this, and how much is choreographed out? How much is rehearsed before the cameras run?
We talked a lot about that scene. That was one time when we did talk, because for Joseph, the character Joseph, it's going to be the start of kind of like the downhill spiral for that character. So emotionally, it had to get to a place that was going to cause that panic attack.
Right.
And also, you're looking at another character who feels for the first time this connection, this love, and this understanding that she's never had with anyone else. And for the first time, she feels that someone can actually see her. And then you have these two people come together who you feel like they shouldn't be together, but they should be.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it's this explosion of all the emotions for him and for her that shouldn't happen in one space. And you're trying to, for Shane, he just had, like, we talked through it, and it was figuring out more just a choreography of when that was going to happen, when he was going to begin the start of the panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of had a small blueprint of where that was going to go in the scene. But like, Stephen Graham is an incredibly open and giving actor, and giving in the sense that he will give you everything on your side of the take when the camera's on you and it's not on him. And he wants to get the best out of every scene. So, we just sat down and we said, look, I'm game for pushing each other as far as we can. And I feel safe. And he says the same. So we just go into it. And we'd spent such a long time before that together. And, but yeah, we did it like about 3 times. I think we did that scene about 3 times. And that was it. And we did it all in one evening.
Wow. It seems like when there's so many emotional points piled up, someone might think, well, that's a lot to have to process during the scene. But is it right that the more the better, in a way? If it's clear, if those things are clear.
Yeah, if you know what is going to happen in the end, you're not trying to end goal it.
Right.
That's what, because otherwise you're going to play that emotion at the beginning of the scene.
Right.
And you can, you know, the minute you start feeling that the scene isn't right, all you need to know, like, and that's why Shane would be, he's an incredible director, because he will look, he'll see that, and he'll know that, like, right, if the end goal here was for you to start crying, I'm not going to give you that note. It's, the note here is for you to hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
And figure out a way how to do that. And by the end of it, you're crying and you don't know how the hell that happened, and that's the magic. Mm-hmm. Because you're not trying to end note it. Because in life we don't try and force out emotions. We try and mask them.
That's right. Always, like always. Yeah. Speaking of directors, like here's a quote from you that I really would like to talk about. Every director is completely different in their approach and how they tell stories. And it's always your job as an actor to cater towards that and be flexible in how you would approach projects or a script or the shorthand on set, because everyone has their own way of doing things. I always am yelling on this show about how it's the director's job to come to the actor's way of working. You are saying, yeah, I mean, but there's also something like active in this quote. It's like you're saying, like, it's taking it, you're taking it on yourself, upon yourself. You're not going to be affected by how they are or aren't coming to your approach. You're coming to their approach, but I'm talking way too much. I want to know what you think of when you hear that quote read back to you.
I just imagine you're like elastic band, aren't you? And all the prep that you've done in beforehand has allowed you, as an elastic band, to be as flexible and stretchy as you can be, so that when you are on set, you have your bag of choices that you're gonna bring because you've prepared. So you embrace the changes that the director is going to throw at you. You know, you commit to the choices that you have, but you embrace the changes that are going to come at you. Because, like I said, the filmmaking is director's medium. It's their vision and what their story that they're going to tell. You are only a part. You are a part of that. And for a director, they're setting the tone on set. And I've worked with incredible directors who set infectious tones that makes everyone want to work to their best ability. And that's the environment that I want to be on. And you are, like, as an actor, we naturally, we're empathetic beings. So we naturally know how to cater towards different emotions and different situations, because that's what we do. And I think that if you can't, I don't want to be that person who's up on set who's trying to change the motion of the wheel that's going in a direction of forward momentum. You don't want to pull against that. Right. So it's figuring out, how do I communicate my ideas to this filmmaker and make it work? But yeah, I think it's because, you know, that's filmmaker, like directors, their knowledge of a film set is their own film sets. We are the ones that, like, go from film set to film set and figuring out, like, the different languages that occur. But for their experience on a film set has been on their own. So it makes sense that they have no other knowledge of it. Unless, of course, you know, you have people who have worked as an actor before they were a director.
Right.
But I think that's what makes it exciting and interesting.
You're kind of preparing yourself. In your wheel analogies is very good, because it's that wheel is going to turn anyway. You can't try and figure out, like, how am I going to get him or her to come to my way of like, that energy is not well spent there. It's like, I believe, though, that the director should be doing the same thing you're doing, trying to figure out how to get to your way of working. But you can't sit back and expect that of them.
No. And plus, a director's got 50 things to be worrying about. You've only got one. That's just to play the character.
Right.
They have to worry about, like, the financiers. You're probably going to turn up on set on the Tuesday, the location that's just fallen through on the Wednesday, and then you've got this actor who's going, I don't know how I'm going to play this. So you have to, there's a lot of things that are going on, and I think it's, like my introduction into film acting was working on set. I was a production runner for the art department in my teens, so I figured out kind of early on, it's like you are just one component in this machine.
Right. That was probably very good intel that you were gathering there.
Yeah, I understand that, you know, if your pickup time is like 6 a.m, our department has been there from 5 a.m, making sure that the set's ready to go. You're not the most important person on set. Nobody is.
Right. You mentioned how Stephen Graham is so great even when the camera isn't on him, even when he's delivering his lines for the actor. You have a moment in Shadow of Violence where a very important scene at the end is happening, and you have to deliver off camera for the star. And I just learned from another interview that you were in the same room.
Yeah.
And so you're on the phone with the main character, and it's a long conversation. It's amazing. But as this was going on, and I'm wondering if it was just because I knew I was talking to you, I just thought, wow, she's really helping him here. This is something we don't talk about a lot on the show. It's like the off-camera work. I mean, in this case, it's different because it's your voice is playing a huge part in the scene. But what was your experience like of just calibrating what you needed to help him do what he had to do? Was that on your mind, or was it just like, I'm going to just play this scene like I normally would?
Myself and Cosmo, because we looked at the schedule, and I actually wasn't scheduled to be on set that day. So this was before we turned over on day one. So I said to producers, put me in, because I was going to be, I wrapped the day beforehand. So I said, put me in to be on set. I know it's not going to be part of the contract, but that's crazy. This is his most emotional scene. Because I think that probably from a sound department side of it, to have another actor in the room,
it was a problem. Yeah,
it was going to be tricky because you'd never want your lines to overlap on his.
Right.
And me and Cosmo sat down and was like, of course I'm going to be there. That's insane. He's like, cool. And so what they did was they built a soundproof, I'm going to say they built it. It was a lot of curtains and boxes. And I was in behind that because the scene is about 5 or 6 minutes long, and it's a long tracking shot in towards him with no cuts. And Cosmo was incredible in it. And yeah, the tricky one was for me was because I could hear and I gotten to know Cosmo and the character for such a long time before this that I could feel where he was emotionally, and to keep pulling back from that. So I was almost like trying to like look at pictures on my phone of like my nephews and nieces playing, so that I wasn't going to get caught up in his emotional state, because that's the whole
so
point.
Interesting.
Yeah. I heard like it was not Helen McCrory, Olivia Colman. They always used to play like the shipping forecast for her in her ear on The Crown, because she would get like emotionally caught up in scenes. So I had like,
they're trying to stop her from crying. They're trying to stop her.
So like putting the shipping forecast in her ear. So I knew it's like you can't get emotional, because then the scene doesn't work, because she's at this other side now where she's happy and she's hopeful that the two of them can be together, and she's with her son, and that is when she's at her happiest. And that's how it works for him.
Despite having to look at pictures of your niece and nephew, it helped you to be there.
Oh, yeah, because I didn't want to do that in an ADR booth.
Right.
No. For me, when I read that scene, it's two people on the phone. So at any point, you should be able to close your eyes and be able to visualize where they are. Yeah. And even though you never see Ursula, if you close your eyes, you could probably tell where she is, and she's in her kitchen and she's trying to settle down for the night, and she's just got Jack in bed, and she's looking forward to maybe what tomorrow's going to bring. You're never just like, that person on the phone. You've got everything else going on for you in that scene.
So Raised by Wolves is coming out on HBO Max here in the States the beginning of next month. You were talking about how Ridley Scott had this way of, he knew what he wanted, but he allowed room for play.
Yeah.
So you felt this vision lockdown, but room for your creativity. Is that right?
Yeah.
I just don't understand how those two things can be together. You know, how do you feel like you can bring something to this when you also at the same time know that his vision is so strong about what he's trying to do?
Well, Ridley comes from an artistic design background. So when I look at his films, every frame just looks like a painting. And that's what he's done. He has painted the whole world for the actors to just play in. So he's completely freed you up in that sense, that you don't have to imagine what the world is going to look like, what it sounds like, what it smells like. It's a palpable feeling on set. And when I talk about when actors set a tone on set, Ridley sets a tone on set where he brings this incredible confidence. And when you bring that, everyone feels safe. And you feel like you can be the best that you want to be in that moment. And that's what you just want to do. You literally just want to turn up and showcase all the work that you've done, but not feel like it has to be perfect. And I think that's what he loves. He loves when you bring something else to it that he didn't expect. You know, he trusts his casting department that the team that they've assembled can do the job. So he's not worried that you can't do that job. He's just figuring out how he's going to capture it.
You do an American accent in this, correct?
Correct.
Do you listen to American accents like my accent right now while I'm talking to you? Are you like an actor who's like hearing me and like, wow, that is weird, or how he's saying these things? And like, are you examining that? Are you like storing that?
Yeah, you steal things. You steal and collect. We're like actors. We love stealing like collectors. I love watching documentaries because it's just real people.
Right.
Watching real people is fascinating because we know we're taking what they're saying to be the truth.
Yes. And do you enjoy doing accents?
Yeah, because it helps with a character. You can sit into that character pretty fast. When you change their voice or their physicality, with Sue in Raised by Wolves, there was a physicality involved. Like, she's a very physically strong person. So I needed to change that. I needed to change that about myself. And an accent can help you sit into that character a lot more, and where they're holding tension in their body can also affect where their voice is coming from.
How do you feed the work when you're not working?
Well, that's a good question, because we've all not been working for the last 3 months.
Yeah.
I think it was Stephen Graham said to me that the hardest part about being an actor is between jobs. Because doing the jobs is the easiest part, because you're busy. You're not thinking about who you are, how to make yourself, or how to busy yourself. So I think that it's life happens between kind of plans. And for the last 3 months, I've just experiencing life, and not to take any of that for granted, not to look at it as a waste of time, because in that time you can be developing parts of yourself emotionally that may have laid dormant because you're too busy just focusing on this one job. And that isn't a waste of time. That's incredibly important for you as it develop as a person, and to have experiences, because that's what it's all about. It's easy for me to play characters that are close to yourself, because that involves no work. But to go and have these experiences, I'm not saying that you have to go kill someone in order to become a serial killer, but to open up your knowledge of another part of people's psychology that you aren't aware of. And I always find that's fascinating. So kind of doing a lot of reading and watching documentaries over the last couple of months has been a very, very useful.
Niamh Algar, thank you so much.
Let's do
Thanks,
this again.
Peter. Yeah, this has been really fun.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.